Hey AstroDevs, welcome back. In the last few videos, we were slowly setting up the foundation for building Flutter apps properly. First, we talked about folder structure and how to organize Flutter projects depending on the architecture you are using. Then we talked about design systems and themes. And if you watched the first part of RhythmRoid Remake, you already saw why those videos existed. They were not random tutorials. We actually used those ideas while rebuilding the app. Now we are going into the next piece, API connection. Because in the next RhythmRoid part, I do not want to stop every 5 minutes and explain DIO, interceptors, error handling, parsing, dependency injection, and why the UI should not directly talk to the backend. That would destroy the pacing of the remake video. So this video is the foundation. We are going to build a clean core network layer in Flutter, then use it in a very small read-only posts feature using JSONPlaceholder. Nothing crazy, no authentication, no refresh token, no form submission, no over-engineered production fantasy. Just the core structure you need before connecting a real Flutter app to an API. And this is also the same kind of foundation we need in real projects like MyCoffeePal, where API communication cannot just be random DIO calls spread across the app. By the end, we'll have a reusable API client, controlled success and failure handling, custom network exceptions, an interceptor, dependency injection, and a simple feature proving the whole thing works. First, we add the package. We need DIO for HTTP requests, we need GetIt for dependency injection. And because I want to show this working inside an actual screen, we also add Flutter block for Qubit. The packages are not the main point here. The main point is that the API setup should be centralized. I do not want every feature creating its own DIO instance. I do not want timeout values repeated in 5 different places. I do not want Qubit deciding how to parse network errors. This is exactly how a project becomes payphone later. So we set up the network layer once, then every feature uses the same foundation. The first real file is ApiResult. This is the return type for our API calls. I want every request to return one of two things, either success with data or failure with a controlled exception. That's it. No random nulls or throwing DIO errors into the qubit. That kind of API layer is annoying to work with. With ApiResult, every feature knows exactly what to expect. When you call the API client, you switch on the result. If it is success, use data. If it is failure, handle exception. Simple. Next, we create API exception. Now, DIO already gives us DIO exception, so why create our own? Because the rest of the app should not care about DIO. DIO is just a tool we are using for HTTP. Your Qubit should not be thinking about DIO types. Your repository should not be thinking DIO errors upward, and your UI definitely should not care about DIO exception type. This lets us describe errors in the language of our app. Connection timeout, send timeout, receive timeout, transform timeout, unauthorized, forbidden, not found, server error, parsing error, unknown error. Now the network layer can translate DIO-specific errors into app-level errors. That means if one day you replace DIO with something else, most of your app does not care. The damage is contained inside the network layer. This is the whole point of wrapping third-party tools. Now we create a simple failure class. This one is intentionally tiny, a message and an optional status code. In a full clean architecture setup, the flow usually goes like this. DIO gives us a low-level error, the API converts it to an API exception, then the repository can convert that into a failure. And finally, the Qubit turns that failure into UI state. So the UI never needs to know what DIO is. For this video, the class is simple, but the idea matters. Technical errors should not leak all the way into the presentation layer. Now we add the interceptor. An interceptor is basically middleware for HTTP requests. Before the request goes out, you can modify it. When a response comes back, we can inspect it. When an error happens, we can react to it. In this video, we keep it simple and add the JSON accept header. But in a real project, this is where you may add authorization token, app version headers, language headers, login, request IDs, or refresh token logic. But there is one rule I care about a lot. Keep this generic. Do not put screen navigation here. Do not put feature-specific logic here. Do not make the core network layer know about a login page, a recipe page, or any other UI. That mistake looks harmless at first, but later it makes the project harder to maintain. The network layer should handle networking. That's it. Now we build the most important file, API client. This is the wrapper around DIO. And the reason we wrap DIO is simple. I do not want DIO spread across the app. I want the app to talk to our own API client. Then the API client talks to Dio internally. Inside the constructor, we configure the base URL, timeout values, default headers, and interceptors. A lot of projects forget connect timeout, and then when the server is unreachable, the app behavior gets weird. So we configure the client properly from the beginning. This file becomes the one place where the general HTTP behavior of the app is defined. Now we add the standard HTTP methods get, post, put, patch, and delete. Each method accepts a path, optional query parameters, optional options, and most importantly, a parser. A parser is what makes this client reusable. The API client should not know what a post is. It should not know what a recipe is. It only knows how to send a request. The feature knows how to parse its own response. So the feature passes a parser into the API client. That means the core stays generic, and each feature owns its own model parsing. Now we add the method that makes the whole thing safe. Safe request. This method handles three kinds of failure. First, Dio errors. Timeouts, connection errors, cancel requests, bad responses. Second, parsing errors. And this is one a lot of people ignore. An API can return HTTP 200 and still break your app. Maybe the backend changed the field. Maybe it returned a list when you expected an object. Maybe one value came back as null. If your parser crashes, that should not crash the app. It should become an API failure. Last, unexpected errors. If anything else goes wrong, we still return a controlled failure. So from outside the API client, the behavior is always the same. That is what makes the layer reliable. Now we map Dio errors into our own exceptions. This is where the Dio specific stuff gets translated. A Dio connection timeout becomes our own connection timeout. A send timeout becomes our send timeout. A receive timeout becomes our receive timeout, and the rest goes on. The reason we do this is because the rest of the app should not depend on Dio's enum cases. If the keyword receives an error, it should receive our error message, not a package-specific object from deep inside the HTTP library. This keeps the dependency direction clean. For bad HTTP responses, we check the status code. 401 means unauthorized, 403 means forbidden, 404 means not found, 500 and above means server error. Everything else becomes a generic bad response. This is basic, but it's already much better than just throwing the Dio exception upward, because now every bad response goes through one predictable path. If you later want to handle 422 validation errors, rate limits, backend error formats are not always consistent. One endpoint may return message, another may return detail, another may return description. Some APIs just return a plain string. So we add a small helper that tries to extract a useful error message. This does not replace a proper backend contract. The backend should still be consistent. But real APIs are not always perfect, so the client should be defensive enough to survive a common response format. This is not over engineering, this is just being realistic. Now we register the API client with GetIt. For this demo, the base URL is JSONPlaceholder. That gives us a fake REST API we can call without setting up a backend. In real apps, this URL should come from an environment configuration, development, staging, and for the production also. But for this video, the important thing is that the API client is registered once. After that, any feature can receive the same configured client. If you later change the timeout, add headers, add login, or change the base URL, you do it in one place. That is why the dependency injection is useful here. At this point, the core network layer is done. This is the part I will use across the projects. Now to prove it actually works, we are going to build a tiny read-only posts feature. This is not the main point of the video. The main point was the core. But without a feature, the whole thing just feels theoretical. So we will fetch posts from JSONPlaceholder and display them, just enough to prove the flow works from UI to API and back. First, we create the post entity. This is the object our app wants to work with. ID, user ID, title, and body. No raw JSON, no Dio. Just a clean Dart object. Now we create the model. The model is the data layer version of the post. It knows how to read JSON and create a Dart object. This is where parsing belongs. Now we create the repository contract. This feature is read-only, so the repository exposes one method, fetch posts. The rest of the feature depends on this contract. It does not care where posts come from. Maybe they come from an API, maybe later they come from cache, maybe later we combine API and local database. The qubit should not care. It just asks the repository for posts. Now we implement the repository. This is where the feature actually uses the API client. We call get/posts. Then we pass a cursor. The cursor checks that the response is a list. Then it maps each item into a post model. If the response is not a list, we throw a format exception. And because the API client already handles cursor errors, that becomes an API failure. This is why the core network layer matters. The repository does not do the messy try-catch block. It just defines the request and add cursor. Now we register the dependency for the post feature. The feature receives the API client from core. Then it creates the repository, then it creates the qubit. Now we create the states. Initial, loading, loaded, failure. That is enough for this screen. Do not overcomplicate the states just because you can. If the screen only needs first state, use first state. Simple state is easier to debug and easier to change later. Now we create the qubit. The qubit has one job: load, post, animate state. It calls the repository, then it switches on the API result. If the result is success, it emits loaded. If the result is failure, it emits failure with the message. That's it. No DO, no JSON parsing. Now we built the screen. When the page opens, it creates the qubit and loads the post. While loading, we show a spinner. If something fails, we show the error message. If posts come back, we show them in a list. And we add a refresh button to call the same load method again. Finally, we initialize everything in main. First, Flutter binding, then core dependencies. Then we run the app. Now when the app starts, the post page loads data from JSONPlaceholder using our API. That's it for this one. If you watched the design system video and the folder structure video, this is basically the next piece of the same puzzle. Design system controls how the app looks, folder structure controls where the code lives, and this API layer controls how the app talks to the outside world. In the next RhythmRoid part, we can finally use this foundation and focus on connecting the app to its backend instead of explaining all this from zero. Also, MyCoffeePal is still moving forward, and the waitlist is available if you want to follow that project. And if you want to support AstroDevs directly, the donation page is live too. Every donor gets the name permanently added into our upcoming app as part of AstroDevs history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.